This presentation looks at the issue of stakeholders. Let's begin by asking the question, what is a stakeholder? Clarkson provides a useful definition that covers a range of issues. Stakeholders are persons or groups that have or claim ownership, rights or interests in an organisation and its activities, past, present or future. Such claimed rights or interests are the result of transactions with or actions taken by the corporation and may be legal or moral, individual or collective. Stakeholders with similar interests, claims or rights can be classified as belonging to the same group, such as employees, shareholders, customers and so on. There are two aspects that I'd like to highlight from the definition. The first is that it mentions past, present or future. This fits well with the growing awareness of sustainability and the responsibility organisations have to future generations and the protection of the planet. It broadens the definition of stakeholders to include those future generations that are not yet born and highlights the social responsibility of organisations. The second point is that stakeholders can be individual or collective. It may be that one customer or employee on their own has very little influence, but collectively they could put pressure on organisations to take certain actions. We can also think about stakeholders based on their proximity to the organisation within the business environment. For example, some are far removed from the organisation and have a more indirect influence, where others are much closer and can have a more immediate impact. We can also link this to the environmental analysis by considering those stakeholders that are in the general environment as those that are in the industry environment or those that are in the task environment. Authors such as Mitchell, Agle and Wood suggest that we can prioritise stakeholders using a theory of stakeholder salience. Using this theory, we prioritise stakeholders based on their degree of power to influence, the legitimacy of the stakeholder relationship. For example, in certain situations, some groups may only have a very tenuous link to the organisation. And finally, the urgency of the stakeholder claim. Mintzberg provides another useful approach to determine the degree of power and influence that stakeholders can have over the ability of an organisation to achieve its strategic objectives. Here he looks at the degree of disruption, replacement, i.e. how easy is it to replace the stakeholders, and the degree of uncertainty which they can create. Imagine that you work in a city such as London, where there is an underground railway. In London, the train drivers belong to a trade union, and during a dispute about working arrangements, they were able to cause significant disruption. They were also difficult to replace and created a high level of uncertainty for travellers and businesses in London. Together, this put the trade union in a strong negotiating position, and they became a key stakeholder. When thinking about stakeholders and the impact they can have on an organisation's strategy, we also need to consider whether the power and influence is individual or collective, and short-term or long-term. In our example, it is collective power of employees embodied within the trade union, and was actually relatively short-term. One way of thinking about stakeholders is to analyse them within three headings that can form the mnemonic ICE. These are internal, connected and external. The internal are stakeholder groups within the organisation itself, such as employees, but you can split these into groups, such as managers, skilled workers or support staff. In reality, not all employees will view a strategic decision in the same way. Some will agree and others will not. So we end up with subgroups of stakeholders. The connected are usually those stakeholders with a strong connection to the organisation, such as shareholders, customers and suppliers. External stakeholders, these are ones such as the general public or central government. The concept of stakeholder mapping has been promoted by various authors. One of the most well-known is the power and interest mapping promoted by Mendeley. Here we can map the stakeholders based on their degree of power and influence and their level of interest and expectations. The key players in the decision are those with a high degree of power and high degree of interest. Organisations need to involve these stakeholders in the decision-making process. Those with a high degree of power but little interest need to be kept satisfied. For example, if influential shareholders are happy with the organisation's performance, they will not wish to interfere in the day-to-day running of the company. Those with a high level of interest but low degree of power need to be kept informed. This will satisfy their interest and stop them seeking to increase their degree of influence. Those with low levels of interest and little power cannot be ignored, but can be directed as to what the strategy is, perhaps without fear of conflict. This slide shows a stakeholder map of a typical higher education institution, or HEI. This was prepared by a group of students on a master's course in higher education. The difficulty with stakeholder mapping, as you can see from the diagram, is the number of potential stakeholders that can be identified. This is where we need to prioritise. By using the ideas put forward earlier, such as the power, legitimacy and urgency of the claim, or the disruption, replacement and uncertainty. However, when used in conjunction with a specific strategic decision, it provides management teams with a framework for developing strategies to deal with the various stakeholder groups. This video is part of a series of short videos that explain specific aspects of the strategic management framework and cover some of the strategy models that can be used in the analysis, formulation, implementation and review and control of strategy, and the role of the management accountant. This presentation is provided as part of the support materials for the book Management Accounting in Support of Strategy by me, Graham S. Pitcher, and published by Business Expert Press.